Give me just a minute to finish setup. Alrighty, fixed it. 1 second as I get this going too. I spent the last hour and a half trying to troubleshoot all of the technical difficulties and then everything I didn't expect going wrong. Okay. All right, technical difficulties over. Back to resetting. All right. Yes. Hello, Slater. We are having a chat here. I've got two things open right now. We've got some YouTube live chat, we've got some TikTok live chat, and the goal here, what's going on is I've got some story beats. I got some specific sections of the next area of the campaign that I'm thinking about using that have a very broad framework and idea. And I just want to start to maybe talk about some of those, but if there's a piece or a part that you're interested in to either ask some questions about or even have some ideas to fill in some gaps. That's the whole thing. That's the whole point here is to participate and to have this like live building conversation here. And so also this video will remain on the YouTube page where more comments can go on later and more conversations be had about it too. But the thing I want to start with is if anyone has been watching the campaign, want to see that in some of the comments if there's been some particular parts that you liked or NPCs or anything like that too. If you've been able to watch, see, be a part of that in any way, just so I can kind of see a sense of who's here and how much people know about the campaign too. While that's happening, I also want to talk through, I've mentioned that there's about 3 different parts of the future of this campaign that are just kind of open up for discussion to talk about, to kind of have some chat around. And so, whether you've been watching the campaign or not, all 3 of these have just been kind of hinted at or might be brand new. So there's entire openness to being able to participate and talk about those things as you see fit. And so, one of the 3 is this idea of this cult that has been outside of the town. A couple of the characters in the campaign have interacted with this cult. Felon and Lorelith have both kind of seen adjacently that this cult exists. And specifically, they drove Lorelith's character out of her home. So she is an elven character who had these like tree houses with all of her elven family living there. And then the whole family ended up disappearing during a war with the gods. But Lorelith herself has lived in her hometown for about 100 years by herself. And then this cult of people came in, bringing this really harsh winter behind them. And then that kind of forced her out because she was just by herself. And that's when she met the rest of the party. So some ideas and thoughts that I have about that cult are that they're bringing in this winter. A lot of people would assume from my campaign that has to do with the god that they worship. But in fact, it's because they are led by an adult white dragon. so I'd love to kind of talk about that as part of like what would a cult being led by a dragon be doing, be interested in, and be working on, which has some specifics to my campaign as well. Huge part of what it means to be a dragon in my campaign is all dragons are like essentially like illegal and outlawed. There was a war between the people, the humans of the world, and the dragons as this fight for dominion and leadership over the world of Canvas. And so the humanoids won that and put away all dragons, tried to kill all dragons, and do actively believe that there are no dragons left. And so the fact that this cult is led by an adult dragon is a pretty big deal. Um, and so with that, um, the next section is possible. If you're interested in talking about that, feel free to throw some questions and comments out. The second area is they're going to be moving to this new city called Dust Forge. There's a couple things around Dust Forge that are really neat. One is it is related to the Kalishtar. If you've been watching the campaign, there's an old, different clan than one of the characters that lived in the caverns and caves underneath of Dust Forge. But there's a particular settlement around this because there's another new stone that has intrinsic magical properties that exists underneath the Dust Forge. In the campaign, in the one that we're running right now, Pilgrim has this Husk Stone, and Husk Stone was very important to his clan. This one, the counts started around this, are all focused around this stone called Dust Glass. And so we can talk about that more, as well as the fact that the caverns are pretty heavily infested with vampires, or at least used to be, and there are still some now. And so they're going to work on that and kind of get a part of that. And then lastly, they're going to be staying with a pretty prominent and rich NPC there. And I want to flesh her out a bit. Some ideas that I have for her underneath of this is that she's going to be interested in resurrecting a vampire lord that used to exist and lead and live in those caves with the vampires. But then other people from the town that killed him maybe 50 years ago or so, and she's interested in bringing him back. And so that's one like long-term quest thing going on with that, as well as the fact that this city, these people, they worship the evil god Drenton of the world. So I want to talk about, and I'm really invested in that and fleshing that out too. And then the third area is, if you've been watching the campaign, there was a lab associated with Brith, Cicero's dad. There's another lab in this area too. The first lab was more around creating monsters and creatures and fleshing out that magic, trying to figure out, all right, how do we create new things, new life? This second lab is more about how do we improve that life? How do we change things, add abilities, and do things that can make them even more monstrous? So those are kind of the three areas. I'm very open and interested to chatting about and talking about what that might look like as I now see if there's any comments or anything going on, or who's all interacting. Um, and thinking about that and talking through if there's any part of the world, the city, the things, what we can start with. Slater hopping in, Draconic Cult is most interesting because it brings more world building lore for sure. So if we're thinking about just starting in that area and focusing on it, and we got one on YouTube, Jacob. I'm about to run a Gothic themed homebrew campaign, so the idea with the vampire sounds really cool too. All right. Yeah, we can talk about dragons. We can talk about vampires. I'm definitely interested in doing both to kind of walk through. But if there's a particular part about either one of those, we can start looking at and walking through. I'm thinking with the dragon stuff, we talked about how dragons are like outlawed, illegal, etc. One thing I'm just curious about fleshing out with that too is like if this dragon is trying to build followers, build some power, and know and understand some stuff about the world, like what are they doing around populace? Like what goal would they have to be getting some people on board with like, yeah, I think I'm letting people know, hey, I'm a dragon and I'm not evil. I'm trying to just build a followership. I think it's just the general heart of what he's trying to do, though it can be mislabeled as evil because of the dragon stuff in the world. the TikTok one disconnected. I had to redo it. Anyway, so yeah, thinking about the dragon one as being like, all right, here's this. The world labels dragons as evil. It's trying to rebrand that and get some followers and work through that. But yeah, the vampire stuff I'm really interested in working on too. I think if anything comes to mind to start with that, one thing that I'm thinking about with it is one, like the mansion that they will be staying at should have some of that like gothic themed stuff. The whole city has this background of it's half the town worships the evil god Drenton, and I think that kind of fitting that into that gothic theme, and you can tell which places, which people, which buildings are built by people in that side of the clan who live in Dustforge. And weirdly enough, the opposite side, there is the town is split between people who worship Drenton and people who worship Anivia, which is the god of death, and the one and fate, and the one that helped resurrect Tuli in the campaign too. So there's a big religious divide in the city. So I'm curious to like kind of flesh out some of that, as well as just some ideas of like what does it mean for this really rich, old money, old religion NPC that the party's gonna live with. This NPC is gonna host the party at it. At their home, and they're just gonna always have this sense of like something's off, something's uncomfortable, and then slowly like piece together and learn like, oh, this person is a vampire, but they're not trying to kill us, but they eventually do intend on like resurrecting this vampire lord and working through some of that. And so it's one of those like there is not going to be this huge action moment where this evil NPC is like attempting to like kill the party, at least not planned. But if it eventually gets there, that's totally open and fine. It's more like they're going to be doing this thing. I think the party would like disagree with, and the party would then eventually be like, "Oh, we have to do something about this." But then there's also going to be that social part of it where it's like, "Oh, if we kill this extremely prominent, famous, rich person of the city, like we are branding ourselves as enemies of the city too." So that's kind of my thought on that as well. Any responses, Jacob, as you commented on it, or Slater, as you're here too? Anyone else who's joining in here? Just kind of thinking through some story beats, some moments, some ways to flesh out this idea of what happens when a party lives with an extremely prominent vampire like leader of their town who they disagree with, might learn is evil, and then have to do something with it. Yeah, for sure, Jacob. Jacob just put in YouTube chat. I jumped in late, but giving the villain a very sympathetic motivation for doing what they are doing could make it conflicting for the group. The first thing that comes to mind with that prompt is like family relation, like that this woman would be a descendant of the vampire lord who died in the caves. And so, if his crypt is down within there, and maybe she even like now I'm thinking about this from your comment, if she like leads the party there as like, yeah, there's this gravesite of my great grandfather, and loved him. He was great for this reasons, those reasons. Maybe he was extremely important in the founding of Dust Forge, or did something very good and uplifting and powerful for the sake of the town. And she's going there and just like visiting him, and there's this heartfelt connection that her desires to do it, even though there may be some evil underneath of it too, on the surface, is that family relationship. Slater is the worship of Drenton by this town open knowledge to the rest of Canvas. Um, so Canvas, because it's so young in the world, in the sense of like technology and relationships and things like that, cities don't really connect with each other or talk a whole bunch. And so even with that, the reason why the party will be going to Dustforge and kind of seeing the worship of this evil god there being so prominent and open in public, they will be going with a government leader of populace to try to establish some type of trade deal. And so like the party won't be involved in that, but that is the heart behind um, why they're going. Hi, Butterbean, as you wave there in the chat. And so, with to answer your question, there is like cities don't really know too much about each other. They're in this exploration phase. They're in this. All right, who all is out there? Because we have been able to now develop and kind of get situated with what we want, and we know maybe our very immediate neighbors. Populace, for that matter, does not really know what's going on in Dust Forge, and so it would be pretty stark, kind of bold. Oh, what is happening here, and what more do we know about Drenton? Slater also asked, "What does God worship look like in a world where gods are forbidden from intervening?" Yeah, so uh, it's it's interesting because like the people don't really have a sense of that part of the lore where after the war between the gods and each other that people kind of got involved with, um, the gods just seemed to be a little less present. And then over, which happened maybe 2 or 3 generations ago, unless you're an elf and that happened within your lifetime. And so the idea there is like that's more of just a question to the people. It's not like, oh, the gods are forbidden from talking with. It's like, no, the gods used to be very prevalent. I have ancestors that cared a lot about their relationship with gods. We know the gods exist because of the history and the development of the world. And so it's like, what do we do with the fact that, like, right now, it just seems like the relationship that the people have with the gods is like more distant. Um, and so people still worship gods because they know that they are essentially in some form of good or had something to do with the creation of the world or the creation of people or their specific towns have like patron gods, things like that, where it's like it's a very heavy culture thing. And so with that heavy culture around it, that's where it feels more like, oh, we do this because this is what our ancestors did. And there's no real concept for like, uh, what are the gods actually doing back? People just find their answers to that, if that makes sense. Um, so that if that kind of answers your question. It is weird and it is challenging for the sake of like um, after the war that the gods took in. They did like kind of work together to say we've kind of messed this up and we're going to take a step back. And so since they are taking that step back, they're finding new and inventive ways to kind of get around that if they want to. Um, and so some of that is like in response to the worship from people. Jacob asking a good question too. What race will the vampires be? Doing a more unique race could really offer unique and cool elements that influence the manner. Yeah, example, a Triton family might have an underground flooded tomb, crypt, etc. I'm thinking Duragar vampires, and maybe Drow, but Drenton himself, the evil god, usually takes the form of a Duragar, and so I think that just kind of overlap would be really good. And so we kind of get that dark under view of it, which I think would be really cool for the stonework, as well as just the overall dimly lit, etc., that you would expect in the Underdark. Dustforge is kind of in a cave too, which is a really neat setting for it, where it's not in open air. It itself is kind of within this massive cavern that then breaks down into more tunnels. Slater, in that case, why exactly do they worship Trenton? What is their motivation as a town? Is that where they get their and deadly power? Yeah, it's where they got the vampiric powers and stuff like that too. It kind of involved a different god, and so partly it's like there are going to be old like tomes and scripts and the perspective on the war that happened between mainly Valessa, the creator god, and Drenton, the corrupted god, that kind of built up the army that would try to dethrone her. And that's the big crux of the conflict between the two. Valessa, being this creator god, had a vision of what should the world look like. And then as she created different races and people and gods that then all collaborated with her, she eventually picked a couple races that she had created that she said were like, nope, these aren't it. This was like a mistake or doesn't fit my vision. And so she cast them away and said, you will not be a part of my world, which is how Apori, the like underworld, was created. And so Drenton is kind of like the leader of this discarded Apori world, this cast aside community. And so that in that, there's a lot of worship for Drenton by the races that are cast aside or normally seen as evil. Because in this campaign, evil just means unaccepted, different, not in the final version of the Lessus creation. And so in these documents and tomes of what Drenton stood for, it is no, these are people. These are lives that have been created that matter. And just because Valessa sees them as they don't belong, it is unjust for her to cast them away. And so he kind of represents that to say, like, no, this was wrong, this was bad, and I'm gonna lead the people that you cast away to say like this should be different. They should be a part. They should have a part in the world. And so the vampires, the Duergar, etc., this town, the people who see that kind of just agree with that thrust and that movement, and then want to see some type of resurgence of Trenton's power. So worship is of him is more like, yeah, we agree with this and we believe in this, and knowing that Trenton has been kind of chained and cast away as well after the war. Worship of him is just like actively trying to find ways to free him and to agree and move in that way rather than kind of submit to Valessa's design. Jacob hopped in. Also going back to the motivation. Yeah, well, I totally agree about lava and flame effects in the crypt. Yeah, Trenton also is associated with volcanoes. There's always like some type of environmental or climate associated with each god, and so lava, volcanoes, etc. That very much has to do with Trenton. And so, yeah, in the caverns and area of that world, there's a volcano very nearby, but I could see different just kind of tracks of lava and stuff going through some of the caves, and that kind of being some of the underground light that provides this like very dim glow. But also going back to motivation, if they're really a kind host that the group likes, maybe having a non-likable faction makes it more conflicting. This religious divide seems like a great start. Yeah, for sure. They definitely have this non-likable faction. The way that it's written out is the city is split into this Clothin clan and this Chained clan. And so the religious beliefs of this town are very important, and they very strongly disagree with each other because Anivia is associated with Valessa and married to, and more with lore, this is fun, Trist, this god that is like the very like what's the very wow, I can't think of the very good, very lawful good. That's why I couldn't think of that. I don't know. And so he's the one that kind of organized the document that is the truce that separates the gods from the people. And so Anivia is like a part of this. Like this is right and good. Les's vision is good, and Trenton, of course, is the big like, no, we should rebel against this. And so there's that huge split. That religious turmoil will be felt and just kind of seeing that she would be very kind, she would be very welcoming, she would use her money for the better of the town to fund the party while they're there, to teach them about the town, to show them things, even get them connected, all of that, and be a really good host. But still, underneath of it, like she would also get to represent this view that Drenton has, that and also kind of be an antagonist to Anivia, which is fascinating because Anivia is the reason that Tuli got brought back in the campaign. She was wearing a ring that was attuned to Anivia, this god of death in the dying process. Tuli met Anivia when she died, and then that got interrupted when she got brought back to life. And so this town is going to be a big area where they can start to learn more about so what actually is going on with the gods. We have been kind of called into this when Tuli died. Anivia said there's going to be a really big event with the gods that y'all are going to play a big part in. And so I think that this town in the campaign setting will be like a place that represents religious history, a place that represents like people who care about this stuff and really dive into it in the way that Populous just isn't. Like Populous, they're nominally with was it Fortunato? Yeah, and they have some stuff that they're like he'll bless this and he cares about us and all this stuff, but it's very just like we live our life and sometimes we say a prayer to Fortunato. It's just not like integrated. But this town, it's like this is really really important. Definitely, we will definitely hop into the draconic cult stuff in just a moment. How long are we? How much time do we have here? All right, yeah, we spent about 30 minutes talking about this. Um, and I plan to go to like maybe 11:30. So in a minute, maybe we'll hop over to draconic stuff. If I just get caught up here real quick, meaning give them an enemy that the group hates, so they align with the NPC, but then feel further conflicted by the NPC's actions. Ooh, okay. What would an enemy of this NPC look like in the town? I feel like it would be some type of religious fanatic for Anivia. Or or maybe I'm thinking maybe here's a thought. We've talked about the Kalistar having a clan. Sorry, give me one second, my throat. The Kalistar having a clan that I want to say has some living people there, but I have a different idea about where this Remy character is. Rini, the Kalistar that Pilgrim is looking for. And I think she's going to be like trapped in the caverns underneath. So maybe the enemy could be like a monster of some sort that is in the way of the party getting to one of their goals. And this NPC helps them sort that out. But it also could be more social within the town too. I'll definitely note that and think about it. I think that's a great idea. Find a common enemy that they work against, and then as the NPC is getting closer to their goal, maybe they need access to a certain part of the cave too that helps them resurrect their vampiric ancestor. As they are seeking that out and getting further in the caves by the help of the party slowly learns kind of more about what that NPC is doing, which I really like. And it kind of reminds me of like the end of Icewind Dale, where when that evil wizard woman is like getting into that like giant skull home. I can't remember, Trust Skull or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. And she has like motivations to get this very powerful tome and scepter and stuff like that. And uses the party, but the party also uses her to dive into that. I think it's a great thread, and like, I'll definitely run with that. Thanks, Jacob, as I'm thinking about that but yeah, let's go ahead and shift over to the Draconic Cult stuff too, and just start thinking about and working through some of the lore and ideas around that. So Draconic Cult, again, some of this context is so Lorelith has kind of run into the fact that there's this group of people who speaks a language she doesn't understand much, which is Draconic. Who kind of took over her home. Thelen ran into them too, but they bring this very harsh winter around them as they are moving. I feel like they'll interact with this, get to Dustforge, or maybe they'll sort out the whole cult thing before going to Dustforge. I'm not sure. But then go to Dustforge. They should learn in Dustforge that like wherever there is extremely profound worship of a particular god, the climate is shaped by that to align itself with the particular climate associated with the god. And so with Trenton, that means that there's going to be like lava and volcano stuff nearby. With Anivia, that means that also it's going to be cold and wintry, and so they might get confused of like, okay, does this cult worship Anivia because she's associated with this winter stuff, which is very good in that conflict of like we need to figure out what this is. And then lastly, it's actually because it's an adult white dragon transformed into a human form in hiding, because if people knew that it was a dragon, like towns would riot and rally and try to get to rebel and to find that dragon and kill it. And it knows that, and it knows the history of that. A couple of things is it knows that there are other dragons. Dragons are alive and well, just very well hidden. And so it is on this type of like mission to find other dragons and also just kind of get reinforcements / get a sense of like how powerful are people across the world, so that the dragons can kind of know what's our play here. Are we trying to go public and convince people that we're okay, or are we trying to fight back and demolish people to get right dominion back from the dragon perspective? So that's kind of like the heart and the thrust of what the dragon is doing and what it's thinking about and working on. And so, in thinking about that with the dragon, yeah, what are some talking points and stuff around that? I think overall, what my goal is for interactions that the party might have soon, it would be meeting the cult, like trying to do some recon, some ideas. Like I'm sure Lorelith is going to want to just run them out of her home, and so it'll be like probably some recon of like, all right, how many are there? Who's here? What can we do? So I think that's a really cool moment of the campaign. It's like, all right, they go to these tree houses, they see that there's maybe 6 to 9 cult members in it, and one of them is clearly their leader. And then once they get that sense, it's like, all right, let's kill them. Is that the plan? Are we talking with them, etc.? Um, and then they engage, and then I'm hoping at the end of that engagement, maybe they learn that the leader is a dragon because they overwhelm, they kill all the cult members, and the dragon is near death, perhaps in human form, and then turns into a dragon and flies away to preserve its life. And so there's this like gut wrenching end moment of like, okay, we just fought this really powerful sorcerer that turned into a dragon and flew away. What do we do with that? And then they just move on. So like, well, there's nothing else to do here. And so I like that thread of like, oh, we just discovered that there's a living dragon, uh, and it's gone, and we don't know where it's going. So I think that that's the main first section of like, what does engagement with this cult look like? If they kill it before it gets away, great. I think that's fine. It would somehow leave traces that they'd be able to figure out that it was a dragon and they could use that information. But I do like the potential story element if it does not die, that it transforms and flies away. So yeah, Slater. Wait, so cult doesn't know if it's for or against humanity? Yes. It kind of they have a default setting of like probably against humanity, but also like the dragons that are meeting and kind of figuring out what to do. Lost a war against humanity, and so starting another one doesn't sound uh, too great. And the wisest leader of them, which I'm not going to get into too much information about that stuff yet, is trying to lead and counsel and get the best chances of survival instituted. And so, poised to make that decision yet? No. Needing more information? Yes. And so, best route to do that, subvert the dragon identity, turn into human looking people, go live out among some people in towns for a while, get a sense of what does the world still think about dragons? Is there any support for dragons to come back? Um, and how what is the best move? If it seems like the world is weak and poised to lose the war, maybe they would like assemble the team of dragons to then fly out and attack several towns across the world. But if people seem to be flourishing and doing well, it would be probably a bad move for the dragons, and so they would work towards joining humanity, maybe rebranding their name, things like that. Any thoughts or ideas with that motivation and setup? I think to um, yeah, I think that there's room for a full actual conversation with this person too. This party does tend to go more social than just rush in and fight, and so it could be they go and talk to this cult and just say like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they have to have this whole fleshed out other story ready to go with that. That's all lies that the party might see through. So I'm really interested in fleshing that out. Actually, that seems wild, and I could see the party being extremely, extremely doubtful of that story, and then not knowing what to do with the fact that like this group of cultists insists on lying. So the carrying of winter weather is an accident. It seems like they wouldn't be trying to do that if they wanted to keep a low profile. Right. Yeah, that's not really something. That's actually a good reason why the dragon would want to keep moving. Because if it stays in one place too long, as it starts to affect the climate around it and the layer starts to develop, then yeah, the winter just kind of is an aftermath of something that it can't really turn off. Um, Lore wise, it comes from the fact that dragons were created by gods, and gods have this ability where their worship turns into climate. And so I've kind of copped that from the fact that the dragons in the monster manual get this layer that reflects some climate change and stuff around them. That they kind of inherited that from being created by the gods, and by having so much innate power within them too, they kind of go hand in hand. So with that, yeah, the longer that this dragon stays in one place, the more the climate is going to reflect this icy cold winter. And so it needs to keep moving if it's near people, for that matter. But it is in a generally winterous, mountainous climate. It's just off the outskirts of that, um, and is affecting that climate, as it's kind of stayed for a bit. But yeah, it's not trying to do that. It's kind of stuck with it. Trying to think of what their cover story could be because they're gonna try to look normal. They're not just gonna be wearing like a bunch of robes and stuff. I think that they're going to pretty clearly see that the leader is magical. I'm imagining sorcerer, like draconic line sorcerer, um, and I do like the idea of potentially like looking for. Oh, there was the home, Loreleth's home, was the site of a big battle between the gods and people during that big war, and so I think that there should be like some type of library, like Elven Treehouse library. So not like a fleshed out like normal one that would be in a town, but like some type of stockpile of documents and stuff that work through like what was happening during that war. And I think that this dragon could be trying to settle in and just learn as much as it can about the power of the elves and in that war and what all happened. And so I think that that's a pretty good cover for why they're there. But just the reasoning of why that's important to them should be different than, well, I'm a dragon and this is what I'm doing. So it's like, I'm just really interested in the religious and battle history. And I see that there's a ton of information here, as well as spells, magical items, things like that. And we're just curious and pillaging it. Loyalists would be against that, but I don't think that the cult would allow them to insist that the cult leaves. So I think that that's a good tension point. You also have some dissension within amongst the cult. Maybe some wants to conquer and some want to stay hidden, for sure. And also, the cult of the other cultists are not dragons. Maybe one or two of them could be like really young dragons, which would be really hard to fight at this level. But I see them as like people who heavily sympathize with the idea of what happened to the dragons and bringing them back, or just outcasts from towns looking for like a mercenary party. And this leader has organized them together to be like a mercenary party or something so that they would travel, so that they would have followers, so that they would build a relationship, to give this dragon just a little more power. Like dragons have this fixation on collecting things. Perhaps this dragon's fixation is collecting people and followers, which is also typical of dragons. That they would get people to kind of worship them, and bring them things. And so I think that that's the kind of relationship that they have. And so yeah, I think there could be some dissension in that too, of like somebody feels like they can be the one to lead the cult better, which they wouldn't call themselves a cult. They call themselves a mercenary guild. Um, and so maybe yeah, like one of them has a plot to subdue their leader and become the leader. And I think that the party could pick up on that and use them in that too. That'd be cool. Um, then you could end up with a scenario like Jacob mentioned, where you have an NPC who they align with at first, but then the NPC decides that it would benefit dragons more to take over. Yeah, probably would be best if the tension within the cult to conquer or not would be close to coming to a head, so the campaign movement is time sensitive, raises the stakes. Yeah, I actually do see this potential dragon war thing to be endgame, but alluded to here. What would happen if the dragons decide it was time to take action? Right. Yeah. So I think that the long term vision I have for this is that um, there's a group of people that have not been talked about at all in the campaign. That there's this like kind of a panel of representatives from across the world, but it's not all cities, because we talked about this earlier too, where it's not the case where like all cities know of each other. And interact and talk with each other. But what is happening kind of in this background of the world is it's kind of a secret society of like people who want to influence the world and move it in a particular direction. And in that is just kind of like unity, and they're wanting to do kind of like a UN situation where it's like, all right, we know what's going on, we know that like messing with the gods and like getting involved in another like god war is a bad idea, but where are the gods? So like they're concerned with that big question. They're familiar with the idea and probably know that some dragons still exist, and so they want information on that so that they can kind of make sure that mankind stays in power. The thing is, though, what's really big about this is the panel is mostly made up of dragons, and so that is like a huge like, wait, what? For me, even as I kind of wrote that out, was like that's wild. But the idea is these dragons are smart. These dragons are extremely intelligent, extremely powerful, and wanting to coordinate the world in a way where they figure out how they get power back. And this is the best way to do that is to then form together and work through the politics of the world to then steer it in a way that either the dragons can take over physically or just be reintegrated. So with that, the dragon is leading this cult, knows of that, has some connection to it. There's probably like they don't have a direct line to one person on that, but they're still associated with here's what we're trying to do and accomplish. So that's like a weird wrench in a whole lot of this lore stuff. But the idea with that is okay, so this particular dragon is submitting to whatever this panel of dragons and people are trying to decide what to do with. Um, has its own power, has its own influence to learn for information and learn more information and report that back. While also dealing with the politics of their own group and some people wanting to subvert them. And so I think in that long game, one thing I really do want to do is I think the main heart of this group of dragons is we just want to be reintegrated. We want to clear the name of dragons. We want to say we can live hand in hand. We can share parts of this world and be okay. And then I think there's going to be one insidious, rebellious dragon in that who, once that decision is made, is like, nah, I'm just going to go on a rampage and try to kill people and get a rightful vengeance. And so I have that story beat in mind already, and I think that's going to be late game stuff. As the party would hopefully get involved and kind of make their own decision on what's to happen with dragons, and then this happens as part of that too. What is the goal of the party? Do you mean the cult party, or do you mean the actual group of players? If you mean the actual players, like I don't think we know yet. Um, or do you mean the panel of people? Yeah, what is goal of the party? Which group are you referring to? Okay, yeah, that doesn't. Um, yeah, I don't know if they know. Like, I don't think they have a collective goal with at least the world. They don't with their own individual stuff. We're still kind of transitioning through, and so I think with the first arc just ending and them just kind of developing this, like, all right, we saved a town, kind of, and learned a lot about ourselves along the way. Specifically Cicero, specifically Pilgrim. I think you get a lot of those two's background and a context in that first arc. Um, and in that, like you're getting the sense of like, well, yeah, I kind of want to chase some of these threads. I want to learn more about like what the hell is this Rose dad doing, and what is this stuff? What do we do or care about in this? So I think you get a couple different opinions of that with like Laura stepping in to say, I think we should do this or that. Thule's motivations and interests and goals are not really fleshed out much. Gwendolyn's are not really talked about at all. Fallon even has got like a couple things maybe, but he seems like just along for the ride. So it's more like I think we're seeing a development of like, all right, we've got a sense of what we think right and wrong and morality and good choices to make. I think we get that out of this first arc, but we don't have like what direction are we moving in? Like, what are we hoping to do and influence the world? Because none of the characters are really built around that or interested in it yet. And so they don't know what to do with dragons. Lorelith has been the only one to speak up around dragons at all, which was when Dragonborn were mentioned. And she was like, immediately, like, wait, this is bad. Like, what do you mean dragons? Um, and so I think that is like, I think she might actually have a goal, not a goal, a motivation that's against dragons. And then to add to that even more, the fact that it's a dragon leading the cult in her hometown. If she learns that, and if she figures that out, is I think she would have this stark, deep inside to say, no, dragons are bad. Like, I get it in the world history. There's a war between dragons and and people won, but it hurt the people. And then after that, there was a war between gods and people, well, not against gods and people, gods against gods that involved people. And in that war, all of her family died. She was gone. When she came back home, her family was gone. And so she's got this I despise the gods feeling underneath. And so I think if she's playing that out well, she's anti dragon, she's anti god. And then as these story beats that we're talking about in this video start to come up, if she's true to those experiences, if she's true to that motivation, she's going to be the antagonist of joining into, hey, yeah, let's reinstitute some happy dragon time. let's get some friendship there now. I think she'd be wary of that. And the same with the gods. And she was even kind of anti Tuli coming back because she's like, nature took its course. Tuli passed away. So I think Lorelith has a great thread on like playing to what we should naturally think because of the history and the lore. I think she does a great job of that. Pilgrim does a good job of thinking about and considering those things too when they're spoken. But I think he plays out more hope. Um, and so I think that those goals, as them being kind of the leaders of being the face and speaking through these things, I think it's a great challenge for them to think through. And then also once they're confronted with this and they're thinking about it and they get a sense of like the end game of this campaign involves, are dragons going to be welcomed back in some way? Are the gods going to be welcomed back in some way? Like both of those are very big meta narrative things for the sake of Canvas that are tense questions that this campaign is going to be built around answering. And so if they're thinking about that, if they're working through those ideas, then they'll start to flesh out. All right, we've got the context. Let's build goals around how we best achieve this. It might be let's learn more about the gods. It might be let's meet some more dragons and figure out how do we make good decisions around this. When it comes to the next arc, though, I think their goals are going to be more around a couple of things are going to happen. One, what's his name? Give me a second. Farragrand. Farragrand is going to use some of the Huskstone stuff with Pilgrim, and um, he's going to get connected with Rini, and they're going to get a kind of a location of where she's at, and the party's. I've imagined the party's going to want to get in contact with Rini through that and go meet her. And so there's some goal and movement of like, all right, we're going to go that way, and that way is Dustforge. In addition to that, too, the populist government is going to start to get associated with them, which has kind of been hinted at for this whole arc. This whole first arc is like, all right, the more you do, the more you are successful, the more attention the government is going to have. But like, these are people who get stuff done, so let's start utilizing them. And in that too, that's when they're going to get. Her name's Treya Lalarian, who's actually Gwendolyn's parents' boss. Gwendolyn's parents work for a winery on a vineyard outside of Populous that's run by Treya, and Treya also works for the Populous government. And she's on like the government panel. She's the ambassador that's going to be going to Dustforge with the party. And so when it comes to like their immediate goals and what's going to move the story forward a bit is where's Rini and getting connected with her, as well as the fact that the Populous government is going to throw some money at the party if they take this government member to Dustforge, which is going to naturally be kind of like next on their map too. So that's what I'm thinking for like just like next steps in movement, which gets them by the cult, that gets them to move through where Lorelith's family was. So that's like a natural stop on the way. later. The motivations of the party seem much more clear with the vampire lord. The cult needs to be more antagonistic, so the party has something to actually throw itself out. Yeah, 100%. Like, I feel like if we go too vague with them, we will get that like paralysis of like, oh, okay, this is just a neutral thing. What are we doing with this? So I think the natural path through the dragon cult thing. I think that their motivation is going to be figure it out and interact with it. If that turns into a fight, great, that can expose the dragon and move that on. I don't see that being a long section. I see that being like, all right, we're going to Dustforge, and while traveling, some things happen. Let's stop at Laurel's hometown. They do that. They run into this cult. They do whatever they want to do with that situation, be it social, combat, whatever. That will end, hopefully, in some way, shape, or form of them finding out that cult leader is a dragon. And then, boom, that problem's gone. Dragon flies away, disappears, whatever. Something happens where it's like, we we can't do anything with this. Like, if the dragon flies away, it's like, oh, let's track it, let's chase it. Oh, we don't know where it went. All right, we've got this government member here. We still need to go to Dustforge. So I think like that is all tied into. All right, that can be like 2 or 3 sessions of like travel, the situation, etc. And go. And then they end up at Dustforge, and that's going to be like the next hub. The next full arc is going to be like, all right, we got some vampires, we've got this town, we've got some religious people, we've got to navigate all of this situation, go through these caverns, look for Rini, figure out more about this Kalistar, perhaps go into the second lab that I talked about. That Brith, I think they're going to stumble into it. Like maybe they find a doorway, like the one that was in Populous, and they see it, and they're just like, "Oh shit! Wait a second, is that another lab? If it has the same magic, the same doorway, that kind of thing." I could see them looking at it and just like, "No way!" And then explore that in the caverns too. I see the caverns underneath of Dustforge as like a mega dungeon, and I see it being like, okay, we're going on like a week or 2 week in-game time excursion, like a long time of like, all right, these are rooms, these are monsters, there are different factions, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this massive network of this mega dungeon. And so that is where I think a lot of this next arc is going to take place. Even if the cult doesn't have negative aims, there has to be at least one individual faction within it that does. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're talking about the dragon cult there. I imagine not the vampire people. But yeah, I agree, and I think just being a dragon alone, and then just depending on how they handle the social part of that, um, maybe we do this because if this is an adult dragon that is doing the bidding of this of the other dragons and doing its like recon mission and just getting to know people well. I think the heart of that is it's angsty. It's like it's doing the job, but like it disagrees that like taking time and walking through um, slowly. I think that if his idea is I need to do this, but his heart is man, I want to be like let's just demolish humans, and it has this like hatred of it. I think that that can be read and seen um, through that too. Hey John, hey, great to see you again, man. I play in Jacob's campaign, and you guest starred as Callendale. Yes, for sure. Love man. I think Callendale's one of my favorite NPCs, even in my campaigns that I've ever played. He was fun. Him and Big B. Oh my gosh, Jacob as Big B was such a good time. Uh, I'll answer your question. I'll kind of get you caught up too. But do you enjoy having people come in to play NPCs? How do you like to bring in guests to the table? Great question too. I haven't done it yet. It kind of did. In the first 20 or so episodes of this campaign, a good friend of ours, Tim, was playing Cicero, and then he had a second kid, and he's kind of out for a while, might come back. And so we brought in Michael Holt to play Thelen. Later. Thanks for chatting. Really appreciate it. You got some great direction here. I appreciate you coming in. And so, John, we have a guy who's playing with us now who thought it was temporary. Seems like he's really loving it. Might stick around. And so that was kind of like this weird blend of like he's kind of a guest NPC or a guest PC for that matter, and but seems more permanent, which has been like great and love it. And so hope he sticks around. Perhaps Tim comes back too. But I do have a couple of friends and some folks who've been like curious about if I would do maybe guest NPCs or even guest villain has been brought up a lot. Of getting somebody to step in and play the monster or play the person once there's that shift and the combat starts. And I really like the idea of that. I really want to do some type of like guest villain. I think that um, it's not done as much. I think it frees me up a bit to let somebody else kind of like play that out. It gives like a more unique personality to that I could do. Like they get this separate, but it also lets me interact with them and kind of in the way that Callendale and Bigby, you know, you can riff off of each other. To be able to do that as NPCs and a villain and do that with two people, I think would be really great. But to answer your question from another angle, um, one of our players does sometimes play NPCs for me too, and so he is a PC in our campaign, and sometimes he'll play NPCs. And so this happened in our like first or second episode where he did just some voices out of the crowd for me, and then we kind of lost track of it. But honestly, he did a really amazing job in episode. I think it's like somewhere in the mid 20s. Where Jacob is a pretty ruthless villain, a guest villain. I don't know if you've had him for a guest villain, but yeah, I think he'd be wonderful. He's definitely on my list of like somebody I'd want to invite in to do that. But Stephen at our table has done a really great job of like being an NPC for me, and then we got to interact with each other. The NPC is named Stefano Scaleback. He's like the father of this family of red dragonborn that run a blacksmith shop in the town, and he's like 80 years old and can barely hear, and was just yelling at the party and making fun of them. The motivation that me and Steven had for this NPC and his wife was I don't know if you've ever watched Bob's Burgers, but there's a couple who run like an art shop that Bob and his family end up going to every once in a while. And just like every scene with them, they're just berating the family and just making fun of them or yelling at them and just telling them what to do in such a like just like destructive way. And it's always so like funny and just everything is in jest. And so we like watched a couple of those videos and just made these blacksmiths to be like just tearing down the party, making fun of them for what they look like, and stuff like that too. And so it's like a great kind of NPC moment, guest NPC moment. And I really want to keep doing stuff like that. Kind of the same way Callendale and Big B fit in of like, yeah, there's some information, they're helpful to do something, but like there's also just like this great space of having a guest NPC who is there to like relieve tension and to be funny, and kind of just break the normal feel of the way the campaign has been going. I really do have high interest in bringing Jacob in as a guest villain. He was here for a lot earlier, and was helping me flesh out this vampire matriarch kind of character, who part of her goals is to resurrect like an ancestor vampire. And if that happens, I mean, I might just have Jacob and say, this old vampire dude from his crypt who's going to come back and wreak havoc on this town. He's all yours, and just let Jacob play this like kind of Strahd-esque evil vampire character. Who Jacob just texted me and said he's driving, but he's still listening. So great, like Jacob, if you're interested and we're going in that direction, I'd love to keep you in the loop and get you behind the driver's seat of that vampire character. Jacob sending a heart. John, if you're interested, I'm hanging out for a bit longer, however long is helpful or interesting to other people. I've just been throwing out like lore and story beat stuff that I've been working on, and just kind of vamping with folks to kind of flesh out some of it. We talked earlier about this the cult being led by a dragon, and it's moving through the world trying to get some information. Dragons are like extremely feared in in my world, and there was a big war against dragons early on in the world where people think they killed all the dragons. And so generally people think, oh, dragons are done. But if ever anyone is seen like harboring eggs or somehow working towards restoring dragons, like death penalty is like on it. Like being a dragon or helping dragons, all of it is like, nope, we're done. Like this is, we did this before. Dragons are evil. Let's just kill them all. But there, of course, are still dragons. And so the party might interact with an adult dragon soon. We worked through some of this vampire demon aristocrat person in the city called Dustforge. And then lastly, one area I haven't gotten to talk about yet is in my campaign, there's this pair of people, an alchemist and a transmutation wizard, and they have worked together for hundreds of years, and they have consistently worked towards lengthening their life and trying to preserve life for as long as possible. And also creating monsters is like a really big thing for them. And so the way that this has come to head is like they've cloned people. One of them was a party member who's kind of figuring out that he might have just been a created clone, and he's kind of working through that mentally. That was Tim. He's no longer at the table, but his character and stuff still exists. And in this first lab that they had explored, there was a lot of remnants of magic used to create some monsters, used to create the people, and just kind of testing out of those types of magic and alchemy. And then in this next part of the story, and they're going to be going through this cave system, they're going to come across this second lab, which is more focused on adaptations of like changing the things that they've created as part of this long story arc of who these people were. Was like they were going from creating life to improving life to then finally what they want to do and have been able to do or are still working towards it is being able to put their own life, their consciousness, their soul, whatever, into whatever they create so that they can create this like perfect version of life for themselves, whatever that is. If that's a monster, if that's another version of themselves that's healthy and good, so that they can just keep moving from body to body and live forever. And so that's the thing. But I see another question coming in. Do you weave factions in with that lore? Makes me think of the Maesters in Game of Thrones suppressing knowledge of dragons. Yeah. There's a couple that just like a group of people that have a motivation around this thing. One of the things is by name, there's this kind of secret society, kind of like this Maester thing from Game of Thrones. There's a secret society of like people. It's kind of like this. The idea behind what the Illuminati would do in the sense of like they're powerful people who have their hands in all of these different areas of the world, just trying to move it in the direction that they want it to. It's kind of just that thread, but it's ideally they think it's made up of just regular people, but the majority of that is dragons transitioned as to look like people. And so these are some like political leaders or maybe what's the word for it? Like the informant, the right hand of the political leader who has like the scribe. I can't think of the word for it right now. I don't know why. But like they're either the important person or they report to the important person and represent them in their ideas and getting their politics and their what's good for them out there. And so there's this panel of people who do that. And because dragons are so intelligent and powerful and wanting so badly to learn about the rest of the world and to get their sake, to get their dragon family and people reinstated into the world, they've weaved their way to be some of these people. And so the thing is, the other ones don't know which ones are dragons. They don't even have a concept to think, oh, those are dragons. It's just we're the people who kind of guide and shape the way the world politics are going. And these dragons are kind of using that as their place to steer the world in a way where they can either clear their name and say, like, hey, we've been existing for the last 300 years after you, or actually, I think 500 or 600 years since you all thought we were dead. We've actually still been here and we've been good. No one's dead. We're not popping out just killing people. We've been able to do that for a long time. So we're good, right? And so they want to kind of like wait until there's a good moment for them to be like, hey, all right, dragons are here, we are good. And so there's that type of faction exists around that. Kind of like sleeves and altered carbon. Big fan of that. I'm not familiar with that media, altered carbon. But if it's similar, yeah, that's kind of the idea. Yeah, really interested how that's going to play out. The party should meet this dragon soon, which is new. This is new to them. Um, they don't know that I won't say who, but one of the NPCs that they've been heavily interacting with in Populous throughout the 33 episodes of this campaign is a dragon, but is not associated with all of this meta dragon stuff. Is not part of this big network or anything, but just knows that they're a dragon, knows they need to keep that under the radar, and does so. And so I'm excited for that reveal at some point too. Which this video is going to be on the YouTube channel, and I think my players do have a good respect of like, oh yeah, they won't watch this because of the spoilers of it and everything too. But it's out there. So for any of you watching this later, go back and try to find out which one you think it is, and let me know what you think. If you're interested, there's like one thing I really wanted to get out of interacting with some people over this, which is this lab is going to exist. This one where the first one they made life, and that was like great. This is cool. We can conjure these monsters. We can conjure and clone these people. And then the second one, they're trying to like adjust and make monsters like do the things they want them to do. I just want this to be a place where there's like some ridiculous abomination of a creature that it's like, yeah, we ran away with ourselves on this one. Like we got together and we started messing around with some spells to like change this monster, and man, we did everything. Like this is a frost giant with a beholder for a head. Like this is something that's like we did a big thing, and this thing's like wild. Must be nice not have Populous explode on the hour. What do you mean? But yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, can you clarify that? Must be nice not have Populous explode on the hour. I'm not sure what you mean by that. But while you're clarifying that, I want to kind of work out like what are some of the like best mechanics to use from other monsters that these magicians, these people who are messing with life, that they could add to an Oblex. Okay. I'm gonna look this up real quick. Um, yeah, that looks pretty nasty. All right. Oblex is extremely intelligent. Oh, an ooze. All right, I love the idea that it's an ooze created by mind flayers. Okay, so it's already got the sense that in D&D lore, it's been created by something else. Fed on other creatures' memories. Oh, we've been doing a lot of memory stuff. I mean, I think this really aligns with my campaign though. Memories, and specifically like being able to use, know, or understand particular memories, and actually these two, the alchemist and the transmuter wizard, have been able to. This is part of the alchemy stuff that they do. They can take memories from someone and brew it into a potion, so that when somebody drinks that potion, they gain those memories, thoughts, and ideas. It's kind of part of their idea of moving through, like how do we get our consciousness into other things. Is also how do we teach what we want to teach in the things that we've created. And so this idea of like distilling memories and using memories and being able to manipulate them is like a really big theme for them. And so the fact that this Ublex like feeds off of memories is pretty neat. That maybe they were trying to use some of that life or technology magic stuff within the Oblex to use that to pull the memories out to then make their potions. Thanks, Jacob. No, I appreciate you being here. Really been enjoying it, and glad we can continue to talk outside of this too, to get some ideas flowing. So let me see some of the stats of this Ublex. What does it do? Combat. Ublex is preferred to victims ambush for attacking using their abilities. Besides a memory draining attack, render victim unconscious multiple times. Ublex It looks and move through new space, aversion to fire. Okay, fire damage, disadvantage attacks, innate spellcasting. Great, love the fact that it casts spells too. Obelix can impersonate one different creatures. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Oh, you're on it, John. I'm definitely using an Obelix in this. That is wild. Subtracting D4 Oh my god. Okay, yes. So I think base. I'm going to use a Nublex, or maybe let me think. Some type of fusion of like an Ublex and a different creature. And so like I mean Ublex and Gelatinous Q. I don't think I want to go with another ooze. I'm thinking of something like what type of creature could contain like this Ublex creature too, where like within it is a vessel that has this Ublex that kind of like driving it. Um, or something like that. Like perhaps this Ublex was able to like completely mind control some other type of creature, but really they're kind of like fused together. I'm trying to think of what type of monster or creature makes sense for that. I'm thinking of something like even like a giant of some sort, where its like stomach is kind of hollowed out, and there's this like glass bulb chamber thing within it, where this oozy Ublex creature is. Yeah, these mechanics are wild. Um, this eat memories thing is a really cool effect, and the fact that it can impersonate different creatures around it is really neat. I'm excited to throw some of that around. Charm person, color spray, detect thoughts, hold person. Let's just look through the monster manual for some type of like large creature that can house a Ublex within it. I've been really wanting to use some type of beholder, but I don't know how to combine Ublex and beholder right now. Maybe that's what I'll just work on. Or like a beholder that is oozy, like an ooze beholder combo. A beholder head in ooze liquid in some type of glass chamber of some sort. And it's just kind of swimming in it, and it's got tentacles that kind of move the bowl around. Mm. Oh, okay. Some type of shape shifting ooze. So it is a Nublex that also like just takes the physical form of like a giant, like a fire giant. Then it could also shapeshift into a beholder. And so it's like the ooze can choose to be in different monster forms. Or it has different phases where it starts in one, and then once it takes enough damage, it shifts to another, and it completely changes like fighting styles. Where at first it's like we need to get away, range this thing down, but then later it's like, oh, now we need to shift into like surrounding and attacking. Behold Blex. It's good. It's wild. Behold Blex. The giant Behold Blex, and so it can go from like maybe cloud giant. Are there water giants? Is that a thing? Or maybe I could just like homebrew some type of like ooze giant. Sea giant. Sea giant is maybe it's a homebrew thing, but I see storm giant. You see sea giant gets slammed, can throw a rock. Crushing pressure. The sea giant chooses an area of water. Okay, so it's some water control. Yeah, maybe I'll do some type of like look at a giant stat block and just kind of make it fit with this Ublex ooze stuff and give it some power there. Man, that's good. Cool. Well, I think that's going to do it. Thank you all for coming around and hanging out. For anyone watching this later, if any of this piques anything and you got some ideas or some direction to move, throw it in the comments, chat with me about it, and we'll do one of these again sometime. So thank you, John. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Slater. Thanks for everyone who came by, threw some comments out there and hung out with us today. I appreciate it. And take care. See you around in the next video.